On a cold winter morning, Jake spotted a dog shivering in the icy lake. Despite his best efforts, the dog resisted leaving the water. Jake's concern grew as he waded in, hoping to save the animal. It wasn't until he saw the dog's leg that he realized the shocking truth. Jake did his best to lift the dog out of the water, but every time he tried to do that, the dog began to whimper. It wasn't until Jake felt around underneath the surface that he truly realized what was going on. "Ah!" he yelled as he pulled his hand out of the water. He had touched something that was attached to the dog's leg, and now his whole hand hurt. But why wasn't the dog getting out of the water? And what was attached to its leg? But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe, and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. Jake pulled his hat from his head and put his hand inside to use it as a glove. Then, he quickly reached underwater, grabbing whatever was attached to the dog's leg. The dog screamed it out, but from the adrenaline, it jumped straight out of the water and ran away. Suddenly, the creature that had been attached to the dog began moving around like crazy, splashing water in Jake's face and pulling him under. He wanted to let go, but it was as if it had suctioned itself onto Jake's hands. Luckily, Jake managed to pull his hands out of his hat, and he quickly got out of the water. His heart raced as he watched a big black shadow disappear into the depths of the lake. He had no idea what he had just encountered, but he had no time to dwell. His hand was still hurting, and he had to find the dog. It was a good thing it had snowed earlier this morning, making the dog's tracks clear as day. He couldn't leave the dog behind after what it had been through. So Jake followed the dog's tracks into the bushes, where he found it licking its hind leg. The dog had barely any strength left, so it didn't resist when Jake picked it up and began walking it back to his car. He had to move fast, as a snowstorm was on its way, and would hit the town in about 3 hours. Just as Jake pulled up to the veterinarian clinic, he saw the vet locking up the building. Jake jumped out of his car and ran to the vet with the dog in his arms. "Wait!" he yelled frantically. The vet jolted around, confusion edged on his face. "Oh my gosh, what happened to you guys?" he cried out as he saw Jake's soaked clothes. The vet opened up the clinic without a second thought, and Jake hurried inside. He placed the dog on one of the tables, while the vet hurriedly searched for 2 heating blankets. Jake's lips were turning purple from the cold, and that dog wasn't looking so good either. "What happened?" the vet asked again, but just as Jake wanted to answer, he passed out. Jake awoke in a dimly lit room, feeling disoriented and weak. He struggled to focus his eyes, trying to make sense of his surroundings. The faint glow of medical equipment was the only source of light. Several people in doctors' coats hovered around Jake, making him feel even more uneasy. These weren't the usual doctors he recognized from his small town. He found it odd how clinical and impersonal everything seemed. This was unlike any medical facility he had ever been to. The doctors, offering vague reassurances, refused to tell him where he was. Their discomfort only deepened Jake's sense of dread. Concerned, he asked, "How is the dog?" But the doctors exchanged uncomfortable glances, avoiding the question entirely. Their silence was more unsettling than any answer they could have given. Jake's anxiety grew, and with no one willing to provide answers, he decided to take matters into his own hands. Sneaking through the hallway, Jake cautiously moved past metallic doors and strange machines. After checking several rooms filled with unfamiliar equipment, Jake's frustration grew. Nothing made sense. He rifled through cabinets and drawers, hoping to find something, anything, that would help him understand what was happening. His search seemed futile until he stumbled upon an office with an unlocked computer. The papers scattered across the desk suggested the place had been abandoned in haste. Jake sat down and began searching the computer, hoping it might hold the answers he desperately needed. As Jake scanned through files, he found reports detailing a secret project involving mutated animals. His stomach churned as he realized the sinister nature of the research. What kind of place was this? Jake's mind reeled as he absorbed the horrifying implications of what he had discovered. The strange creature he had encountered earlier might be one of the experiments. Moving carefully, Jake began his search through the facility. Each step echoed in the quiet hallways, and he kept his eyes peeled for any exit or sign of Buddy. He scanned room after room, but found nothing but strange equipment and empty spaces. Then, he found a map of the facility pinned to a wall. It gave him a sense of direction. The containment rooms, where he hoped to find Buddy, were located on the lower levels. With renewed determination, Jake descended the stairs, the cold air growing colder as he went deeper. As he pressed on, a faint whimper reached his ears. His heart leapt in his chest. Could it be Buddy? He quickened his pace, desperate to follow the sound. The whimper grew louder, guiding him toward the containment rooms. When he reached the containment area, his eyes scanned the room filled with cages. Monkeys, birds, and other creatures were confined in small, sterile enclosures, their eyes full of fear. Jake's heart ached at the sight, but he focused on finding Buddy. Finally, he heard an unmistakable bark. Relief flooded him as he moved toward the sound. There, in one of the cages, was Buddy. The sight was heartbreaking. Buddy, his loyal dog, was locked in a tiny cage, looking confused and frightened. Jake's heart swelled with relief, but he knew the mission wasn't over. He had to get Buddy out of there. The lock was electronic, and Jake knew he had to remain calm to disable it. He looked around and spotted a control panel nearby. His fingers flew over the buttons, hoping to figure it out before anyone noticed. Time was running out, and he couldn't fail Buddy now. After tense moments, the electronic locks clicked open. Jake rushed back to Buddy's cage, opening it and saying, "Come on, boy. You're free now." Buddy staggered out, his swollen leg slowing him down, but Jake gently helped him, easing his fear for a moment. The urgency returned quickly. The snowstorm outside had already begun to disrupt the facility, and the lights flickered. Jake needed to move fast. "We have to move fast, Buddy," he whispered, scanning the area to ensure no one had seen them yet. The facility was eerily quiet as they made their way towards the ventilation system. Jake carefully avoided the patrols, moving cautiously with Buddy by his side, his weak legs dragging. The tension was palpable, but the snowstorm outside was their only hope. They had to escape before it was too late. Crawling through tight, cold tunnels, Jake could hear Buddy's occasional whimper urging him to keep going. The chill of the metal and the confined space made every movement agonizing. But Jake pushed forward, murmuring encouragement to Buddy as they inched toward the exit. Finally, they saw a faint light ahead. Freedom was within reach. Jake's heart raced as he crawled towards the light, urging Buddy to keep moving. The light grew brighter, a beacon of hope in the midst of their struggle. Emerging from the ventilation system, Jake and Buddy were met with the blizzard's icy winds. The cold hit them like a wall, but Jake held Buddy close to shield him from the storm. The sight of freedom was brief but sweet, and for a moment, they both felt relief as the storm raged around them. The brutal cold wind lashed at Jake and Buddy as they trudged through the snow. Jake could barely see through the blizzard, but he knew they had to keep moving. "We're almost there, Buddy," he said, wrapping Buddy tightly in his coat to keep him warm. The storm was worsening, and every step was a struggle against the biting wind. But they couldn't stop now. The town seemed far away, and Jake's body ached with exhaustion. Buddy leaned against him, shivering, but Jake's determination kept him going. Every gust of wind felt like a personal attack, but the thought of Buddy's survival and the truth they needed to uncover pushed Jake forward. They had come too far to turn back. As they moved on, Jake spotted headlights cutting through the snow. He waved desperately, shouting for help. The truck slowed and stopped, and an older man helped them into the warmth of his vehicle. Jake carefully laid Buddy on the seat, feeling a wave of relief wash over him as the truck's heater kicked in. "Thank you," Jake breathed, grateful for the man's assistance. Once inside the truck, Jake urged the driver to head to the only open vet clinic in town. The urgency in Jake's voice left no room for questions. They needed to get Buddy help as soon as possible. Snow continued to fall heavily, but the sturdy truck kept them moving steadily toward the clinic. On the way, Jake's phone, nearly dead, still allowed him to call the sheriff. He explained briefly, hoping the sheriff would take his call seriously. "We found something disturbing," Jake said, his voice trembling. After hanging up, he turned his focus back to Buddy, whose safety was his immediate concern. At the clinic, the vet and locals worked quickly to warm Buddy up. wrapping him in heating blankets and using warm towels. Slowly, Buddy's shivering subsided, and the life began to return to his eyes. Jake watched intently, a glimmer of hope starting to replace the fear in his chest. Once Buddy was stable, Jake knew it was time to reveal what he had discovered. He pulled a folder from his bag, filled with the documents he had taken from the facility. "We need to talk," Jake began, breaking the silence in the room. The vet and the locals leaned in closer, sensing the gravity of the situation. Jake showed them the documents, detailing the horrific experiments involving genetically modified animals. This is unbelievable," the vet murmured as they all took in the grim contents of the folder. Jake explained that Buddy wasn't just any dog. He had been part of a secret government experiment involving mutations. The facility had subjected animals to terrible experiments, causing both physical and psychological torment. Jake's heart pounded as he revealed the worst part. They dumped Buddy in the lake after the experiment, probably thinking he wouldn't survive. The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. "How could they do this?" someone exclaimed, the shock and anger evident in their voices. Buddy had survived, but the trauma he had endured was unimaginable. The vet insisted they inform the authorities, and the group quickly realized the depth of the conspiracy. Jake nodded in agreement. They had to make sure no other animals suffered the same fate as Buddy, and together, they would expose the truth.